I will use the mic as well. So hello everyone and welcome. For those of you who don't know me, who haven't met me yet, my name is Peter Girizzo. I'm the Superintendent of Schools for the North Shore Schools. We are joined here tonight by our entire Board of Education. So Sarah Jones, President of the Board, David Ludmar, Vice President of the Board, Joanna Commander, Richard Galati, Tim Madden, Marianne Russo, Lisa Vizza. We're all here tonight and we're joined by our architect, C.S. Arch, and our construction manager, Savin Engineers. And we have our bond advisors here to talk with us about some financing tonight from Capital Markets. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time tonight, but our goal here tonight is to get more input, more feedback on the work that we've done on proposing a possible bond for the fall that will enhance instructional issues, infrastructure issues, safety and security, and energy performance across the district. So we have been at this for the entire length of the year, pretty much all year. And so we are finally at a place where our scope matches our financing needs, and what we'd like to do tonight is share with you and the community the work that we've done over the course of the year, the plans that we are planning to propose, get your feedback on those things, and then we will bring all of this information back to our Bond Advisory Committee, which is meeting next week, and to do some final scoping. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Tina. Tonight is designed to be to take your questions and to make sure that you leave here knowing a lot about what we have planned for you. Okay, so welcome again. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate your attendance. So this is actually a follow-up to an initial community meeting that we had a couple months ago. So if there's anything that's not clear as we're talking through it, just feel free to interrupt and ask questions. So tonight we are going to go through the district priorities and goals. We're going to talk about the process from November of 2018 until now. We are going to get into detail about the scope of work, talk about some of the design issues and concepts, and then we will talk about project cost, which we've been working diligently at, go through the timeline, and then there's time for discussion. And again, if there's any questions in the meantime, feel free to ask them. So back in the fall when we started the project, the district, we worked with the district to come up with a number of priorities that they wanted to focus on, and that was safety and security, instructional space, infrastructure, and energy performance, and that's through potentially an energy performance contract. The goals were for this project to be tax neutral, to be bold and impactful, to make an impact where we could, to provide a healthier, safer, and more efficient environment for your students that are both contemporary and collaborative to support how students are learning now throughout all of the schools. So when we talk about safety and security, we're talking about improving safety and security through a number of different measures. That's through both architecture, through technology, and some of the active measures that we'll talk about through the scope of work. These are really just some examples of the types of improvements that we'll be making, whether it's card access, additional cameras, security entrance and vestibules. And then instructional space. So what we are looking really at is reorganization at a number of the schools. And then we did look at enrollment projections, how the schools are being utilized, to better improve the spaces that you have, and if needed for additions. What we did find is that the enrollment is pretty stable. There's a little bit of an increase at the middle school at some point, and that your district is utilizing their buildings very, very well. So there really isn't much room for shuffling. And then infrastructure. So the state education department requires that districts do a building condition survey, and the infrastructure improvements were really focused on the last condition, the last survey that was established, and also through all of the discussions that we've had with the administration and the users of the building. And then an energy performance contract, which is something that we'll talk about a little bit further into this presentation, but the goal is to align that with the project so that you can maximize your funds and address and not duplicate how you're addressing the needs. So from October in 2018 until about April 2019, we went through a number of phases that we focused on, both some exploratory and assessment at the same time. So we had a number of meetings with multiple people in the district. We had a core group with the administration as well as the bond steering committee. We met with all of the principals at all of the schools. We met with all the directors of different departments. And including everything that is listed above. And then we had follow-up meetings with building principals, really to develop the true scope of work and to talk about instructional space in particular. We also simultaneously were looking at a lot of the investigative and assessment portions of the building. So we had a security consultant come on board who did a full assessment of all the buildings at the district-wide. Our architectural team was in the buildings walking through both on their own for looking at infrastructure as well as talking with the building principals and the users. And we also did a very thorough review of the building condition study and the 5-year plan that was previously done. We also looked at all of the infrastructure needs as well. So what we did is, this is an example of one school, but we did this school by school where we developed a scope of work that came both from, again, from all the discussions that we had, from our observations, and from the previous assessments and studies. And for each school, we had a list of items, and it was categorized to fit into the priorities, which was either safety and security, instructional, infrastructure, an energy performance contract, and also health and wellness, to see how that kind of fit across the district. And what we found is that there are a number of items that really fall into multiple categories. So from that point on, what we did was we had this list for every school. We've prioritized the scope of work per school. And we've done this through the last 8 months of meeting with the committees and the principals. We are reconciling the project estimate, so that's where we are now. We've initiated communication with the state education department, so they're well aware of the project that the district is looking to put forward, and working with them on aid. And we are currently reviewing energy performance contracts that the district put out a proposal for. We also just settled and selected a site and civil consultant to start looking at the site aspects of the project as well. So we're going to get into the scope of work for all the buildings. Are there any questions in the meantime? Okay. So I'm going to go through this by category. We're going to focus first on the instructional space improvements. We're looking at addressing each media center at every school and each STEAM lab. At the middle school, we're looking at a small addition and renovations. The addition will accommodate assembly space, a study hall, a new STEAM lab, and a math lab with a coding lab associated with it. High school renovations include reorganization to really create a better aligned department. So a math and science location, a humanities hub, and then better defining the existing technology area. We'll also be addressing the choral band and orchestra rooms, the robotics lab, which is right now in a makeshift space, and introducing an active classroom and multiple breakout rooms to support the students. Additionally, we'll be looking at the guidance department and a few special education classrooms as well. The non-instructional improvements include, and this is really district-wide, we're looking at renovating selected bathrooms through all the buildings. We are adding a transgender toilet room in each school. We're renovating the nurses' suite at Glenwood Landing. Across all the schools, we are replacing aging interior doors, door frames, and door hardware, and that falls into the security piece as well. We're adding permanent cooling systems to all of the classrooms. We're doing some wall tile replacement at Glenwood Landing, as well as adding a connecting corridor at the high school, enlarging the stadium bleachers, replacing the press box, and we have some improvements at the administrative office. Yeah, maybe you can talk about this. Let me just see what the next slide is in case. Yeah, you can take the next few to talk about that.
So in addition to some of the infrastructure and instructional spaces that we're addressing in the capital project, one thing we looked at district-wide is the security systems, the technology district-wide. So in this same project, what we're going to do is expand and enhance the existing video surveillance systems that are already in each school building. We're going to upgrade the card access systems, which really involves upgrading the software and the hardware rather than the devices on the buildings themselves. Updating existing intrusion detection systems, so that's like, occupancy sensors and things like that, glass break sensors. And then integrating all security systems district-wide into one central hub, so it's more easily manageable by the district. And this is really, based on the safety and security scope of work, this is sort of a graphic of how it all breaks down financially, the buckets of scope and how they're being allocated in this project. And then the energy performance contract, as Tina mentioned earlier, in parallel with the capital project, the district's going to implement what's called an energy performance contract. And that's really a project that is focused on energy conservation measures, making the district more energy efficient. And the project pays for itself over an 18-year life cycle of the project. So it's actually, it's no extra cost to the capital project, and it's no cost to the community. It's something that's pretty much funded by itself. So what we're going to do within the energy performance contract is interior and exterior lighting modernization district-wide. Basically, every light fixture you see in the district will become LED, automatic lighting controls, daylight harvesting, even exterior throughout the district. We're going to optimize the existing heating systems in the building. John Hall and his team have done a great job of keeping the existing heating systems in every building. They're very well maintained and they're operating just fine. We're going to optimize them with some of the new systems that we're putting in. We're going to do some minor building envelope improvements, really to seal up all of the buildings, to eliminate leaks and things like that. Controls optimizations, plug load management. The big thing is air conditioning. So what we have found in discussions with the community is air conditioning and instructional spaces is really important to this community. A lot of instructional spaces currently, especially in the high school and the middle school, have temporary window air conditioning units. Where those currently exist, we can replace them with a permanent cooling system through an energy performance contract and not have to pay for it through the capital project. The spaces that don't currently have window air conditioning units, we will have to add cooling systems to those spaces as part of the capital project. So it's sort of a balance between the EPC and the capital project, but the ultimate intent is to provide permanent cooling in all instructional spaces district-wide. And then we're also reviewing a solar component to the project. We've also heard from the community that there's a great interest in renewable energy, and particularly solar. So we're looking at options for solar canopies, roof-mounted solar, solar shading structures for playgrounds, things like that right now. Right now, based on the proposals we've received, it's anywhere between a $2 million or a $5 million project, the bulk of that being the cost of the air conditioning and the energy performance contract. It will be designed and constructed concurrently with the capital project, so there's an overlap with contractors and especially our construction management firm. We did get 3 proposals, which we're in the process of evaluating, and we're hoping to make a selection soon so they can start their investment grade audit of all of the buildings in the district. And why is this important? Not only does it help operating and maintenance costs with the district, but it's also, it goes back to the health and wellness, especially the air conditioning, the proper ventilation, the heating in all the instructional spaces. Not only the teachers, the faculty, the staff, the students, everyone benefits from a, you know, a healthier environment.
Is there a number of how many classrooms in the whole district? It seems like a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think I have the number off the top of my head, but
School ends the end of June, is it really necessary to, how many classrooms are we talking?
every classroom.
Every classroom in 5 buildings.
Yep.
We have a number of how many of them?
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, how many classrooms are in the district.
But the classrooms that currently have, so there are almost 50% of them already have units.
I'd
in.
say anywhere between 30 and 50% already have window air conditioning units.
What happens with the units is when you turn the unit on, the ventilation then doesn't work. So if there's no proper air circulation or a proper air.
Because it's just a plug-in window air conditioning unit, you start to provide cool air to a space. The unit ventilator, the thermostat senses cold air, and then the unit ventilator wants to turn on and push hot air through the building, and so they kind of fight with each other. Whereas if you have a permanent cooling system with the same integrated controls, they can balance each other.
The other piece of it is that a lot of the classrooms that are servicing special education students as well require them. And so it's very difficult to dedicate certain classrooms with the scheduling, especially when the district is utilizing their buildings by 80+%, which is very high, which is really admirable, but it creates a difficult situation.
Life expectancy of the HVAC equipment is typically 25 to 30 years, if not longer. I mean, what we find in school districts is they last even longer if they're well maintained.
So I'm going to just run through, these are really diagrams to kind of understand in terms of the scope of work of where the scope is distributed throughout the building. We're going to get into a little bit of detail on the instructional spaces, but this is really to show that across, is this a laser, do you know? I don't know if that's going to work. At Glen Head, you'll see, like at every other elementary school, we are modernizing the media center and relocating the STEM lab, or the STEAM lab. So right now, the STEAM lab is actually in a basement location with very little daylight, if any at all, in fact, and really set apart from most of the students in the building. We are putting in a new secure vestibule and security office, inserting a transgender toilet room, and like I said, addressing a number of the bathrooms throughout the space. At Glenwood Landing, the Glenwood Landing STEAM lab is actually in the basement. We're doing the same. We're modernizing the media center, relocating the STEAM lab from the lower level up to the main level, and looking at ADA access to the main entrance, a secure vestibule and office, and again, multiple renovations throughout the space to address the bathrooms that most of these bathrooms have not been addressed in 20 to 30 years. So the ones that we are addressing are really in bad shape. So this is at Glenwood Landing. You can see what adding a ramp starts to look like. This is a very conceptual rendering of addressing the access to this building. So right now, if you require assistance getting to this building, to the first floor, you have to go around the back and find the elevator and go up to the main building. So this addresses both ADA access plus the secure aspect of entering a building. At Seacliff, we are doing similar work, modernizing the media center and relocating the STEAM lab. The entrance will be addressed as well, and selective bathroom renovations. And again, looking at adding an entrance, a secure entrance vestibule and access to the front of this building. So in all cases, and we did talk about this, I think, at the last community meeting, the importance of a secure vestibule is to slow down an intruder and to really control who's coming into your building. So the proper approach is to have a secured double vestibule with an office that's adjacent to it that that security officer is, is really controlling who comes into the building with the intent of keeping your visitors in a controlled environment and not traversing through the school. So we want to talk a little bit about the media centers and the maker spaces and why they're important. In both cases, both of these spaces, the maker space is a fairly new type of space, but the library, which is now mostly referred to as a media center, has really evolved. It's really it's a multi-purpose space, and really it's one of the spaces we're focusing on because it really addresses all students. This is one of the spaces that no matter what school you are at, all your students use your library and they use it frequently. The way that they're being designed and utilized now is really to support both individual and collaborative learning. They're much more hands-on to foster creativity at a very young level and to introduce problem solving at a young age. They inspire natural curiosity, so kids really want to be there. They want to be playful, and they're very flexible with ample technology and mobility. So the library where, you might see now where you go get a book and sit and read it isn't really how libraries are functioning now. There's a lot of technology. They're used for project-based learning. They're used for individual study, for collaborative work, and even for class. So at the elementary school level, what we're looking at is making them both age appropriate through both the furnishings and the furniture, improving keeping the amount of daylight that you currently have, which is really beneficial, and making them flexible both for formal and informal study. So each of the media centers that you'll see has these 8 components that are part of it. There are breakout rooms that support small groups that still allow a teacher or your librarian to see what's going on. They have group reading areas. They still have traditional stacks, which you'll see. They have both informal seating and formal seating, a traditional circulation desk, an office and a workroom to support the needs of the librarian. And then a lot of times, and what we are introducing here is connecting the STEAM lab to the media center. And it's often because of the technology that's associated with the media center that allows that to quickly convert and translate into STEAM type work. And also still computer stations. So like you see here, there's a bank of computer stations, and that's still very common. So they are playful, yet they're appropriate for the age group. They support both active learning and, in fact, rest time for young students, which they really need as they grow. And they're flexible both for individual and for group gatherings. So we want to just go through each elementary school media center and just give you a sense of how they are shaping up. Each of them has the components that I talked about. They're organized a little bit differently, really, because they're based on the space that we're working with. So we're not looking to expand any of them. We're working in the boundaries of the walls, but they all do translate a little bit differently from what the library looks like now. So in this case, you can see the breakout room that is really a large enough space for a full classroom. You can see the informal seating, which is number 4, the stacks, which in this case, part of them will be mobile so that they can be moved around to really change the use of the space. The smaller breakout rooms and the group reading areas, as well as the circulation desk and the workroom. And then number 7 is the STEAM lab, which you can see is in an existing space that will be connecting to the media center. And so this is the type of environment that we are beginning to create for your kids. At Glenwood Landing, the same thing. So I'm not going to go through each space, but you can see how they lay out a little bit differently. And again, it's based on utilizing some of the double height space, using the natural daylight in the right locations, and really the confines of the space. So much of the work we're also able to do just through the furnishings and the furniture as well in this case, and just through the change of lighting and creating zones that really start to shape the different areas for the students to use. At Seacliff, same thing. Mhm.
But while I'm doing that, a question, the informal seating is informal as compared to the formal seating of the breakout room?
Yeah.
It's differentiated though.
Yeah, the informal seating is for, potentially for one or two students to kind of just, if they're taking a book, to be on a book and be reading it, or be on a tablet, and be working either individually or with one or two or three people. So you can start to see, in this case, we're introducing some small kind of seating areas that are actually built into the stacks, and then some of the other stacks are mobile to help change the space as needed for the small groups or the classes that are coming in. So we'll move on to the middle school now. Yeah.
With the Glen Head Elementary rendering before, it looked like an entire wall was devoted to the computer stations. It seemed like a lot of space considering a lot of people seem to be going over towards netbooks, light laptops, tablets.
Mhm.
Is that much space required in that area? Is that
So in this particular school, the request from both talking to the principal and the librarian is that they do use it this way still. I think from now until when we actually design this, this is all concept pre-referendum work to help us establish, the scope of work, the budget. Those are the type of things that we'll still be able to address. And so if we see the district moving more into tablets and less desktops, then we know we can actually better utilize that space.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so the middle school. The middle school, we're doing a couple big moves to help improve the circulation at the school. So these are the existing floor plans, and what you can see is that the image on the left is the intermediate level, and the image on the right is the upper level. So right now, students come in at the upper level. Visitors come in at the upper level, where the arrow is to the right, and then students come in at the lower level through the courtyard. And to get from the visitor entrance down to the intermediate level, you have to go all the way through the school, down a set of stairs, then down another hallway, and then eventually get to either the classrooms or the cafeteria. The other important factor here is that the main office is really far from your main entrance. So anyone who's coming in basically is walking through your school where all your children are to access the main office. So the two factors that we're trying to address are circulation and organization, and also your the location of your main office in reference to the entrance. So what we're looking at is moving your student and visitor entrance to one location, to the intermediate level, which is basically where your students kind of come in now, but putting a small addition on to accommodate that, and then also create a link to the upper level. So now students can come in from that lower level and walk directly up a half a flight of stairs, in fact, across the hall and be at the upper level, which is where the media center is as well. So this kind of closes the loop of the building, and addresses some of the instructional space as well. The way that we've color-coded this is really based on department use and instructional use. So you can see that the lighter green are science and math classrooms, The orange are art and music classrooms, and there's a combination of special education dispersed throughout, and humanities classrooms are in the blue. The darker black box is the area that we're looking at the addition, again, to make the connection from the lower level to the upper level, and also now to create an interior courtyard. So what that does, I think this floor plan might be a little bit clearer. It creates a new secure entrance vestibule. It allows us to relocate the space that is currently, right now, we have to the left of the entrance is your existing fax classroom. We're going to relocate that and then move the main office adjacent to the new entrance. We're also putting on an addition that would accommodate both a study hall, an assembly space, and a STEAM lab that the middle school currently, well, they have one, but it's actually a half a classroom, so it's not really living up to the program that the school can deliver. So that's an important factor, and then also adding a math classroom, which would be connected to a classroom that would be used for coding. So these three areas. I'm going to just step here for a second just to point this out. So the new entrance is up here, which opens up into this new study hall and lobby space. The main office is to the left. And these two spaces are your new spaces that would connect to the coding lab on the upper level. So this is what the new entrance might would look like, where we are accommodating the number of students that are coming in on a regular daily basis, but also adjacent to the main office to improve security at the entrance. This is once you walk into the space, the main lobby space that would bring you up to the STEAM lab, but is really a multi-purpose space that can be used for assembly, for ensemble, for events after school, and for instruction and lecture. So that's going up to there's actually an exit out at the upper level. So when you go into the middle school, as you start to pass the car loop, the second entrance is actually lower. So it's a half a level lower. Oh, yeah. So we have to distinguish between entrances and the required exits that are regulated by the state education department and egress in general. But all of the exit doors would have measures on them so that if they are opened, the district can be alerted that there's an open door. But what this does, it brings everybody in one location as an entrance, and it relocates the main office adjacent to the entrance now, so that you can really control where your visitors are in the building.
Did you say that the main entrance enters into that main area? I just want to make sure I heard that right.
I'm sorry?
After the main entrance, you go up the stairs, and it goes into a main area where the kids hang out?
So the entrance, there's a secure entrance vestibule, and then a visitor actually would go directly into the main office and not actually have to enter into the building. So there's actually access from the secure entrance vestibule directly into the office.
But not into the main area?
Not unless the school allows them to.
Can you point it on this where the
Sure. This doesn't have a laser, does it? I'm afraid if I hit this red button, it's all going to turn off.
So you can see the secure vestibule, which is the new part of the new addition. There's a door to the left of that, which goes directly into the main office. So visitors would come into there and go into the main office and not actually enter into the new lobby.
So this is actually just pushing where your students right now come in from this area, but they enter in here.
They actually stay in here or they go into the cafeteria until classes start.
It's where the students come in now at the middle school. Just outside of the cafeteria. The other entrance is your visitor's entrance, but it's really far from your main office. So they buzz somebody in, the security desk is there, and then they walk whoever down.
So that'll be just the,
That'll become an exit and will be locked.
I got it.
You mean the upper level of the roundabout, is that gonna stay as a roundabout for no reason then?
Well, so we actually have just engaged our site consultant, and we'll be taking a closer look at how to better utilize the exterior and the site as well. Right. The office is down the hall. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's not about distance. It's about not being adjacent to your entrance and being able to. Well, we can't fit the main office adjacent to your for the main entrance, and your students are already coming in because the bulk of the spaces that they are accessing first thing are on the lower level, first thing in the morning.
So there were a few things that we were trying to achieve in this design. So partially, it was the main entrance, right, and bringing students in through a single point of entry in a secure way, right, of visitors and all that. So that was one issue. The second issue was we had to deal with the fax classroom, which was outdated.
Right.
The third issue was that the building dead ends on either side. And so we were trying to figure out how to deal with the dead ending of those spaces. A fourth issue was we were trying to incorporate a true STEAM lab or a makerspace into the design. And then a fifth thing that we were trying to accomplish was a larger
Assembly space.
instructional space where we could bring groups of kids together that would be flexible, right? And so what CS Arch came up with was doing it in the visitor entrance was impractical. Plus, we needed another classroom space. So if you're familiar with the middle school, there's a social studies room in there. We had to relocate that social studies room to accommodate for more space within the library. And then originally, we had talked about enclosing the visitor entrance there and making another classroom there, but it got scoped out of the project due to cost. So this design actually, it helps us achieve 5 or 6 different
In one move, yeah.
objectives in one design concept.
So we'll also be looking at the media center at the middle school as well. And again, a lot of the same components, but just different treatments to accommodate the older students. So you can see things start to change a little bit just by a little bit more group areas, more breakout spaces in this case, but still a lot of books. So we have been working with your librarians to understand the circulation and to accommodate that through each media center. So again, in all cases, we're not actually enlarging the media centers. We're working within the confines of the walls and just trying to maximize the space that's there. The high school, we are looking at some reorganization as well. So this is the existing floor plan, and similar to the middle school, the red dashed line indicates the main paths of travel of circulation for students. And you can see that this is color coordinated again by instruction. So your light green is your science and math, the dark green is technology, blue is humanities, and then the art is in orange. And what you can see is that your science and math classrooms are actually on opposite wings. As are your humanities classrooms. So one of the things we're trying to do is to reorganize the school so that your math and science classrooms are all in one area, really creating a math science hub, and the humanities are doing the same, and looking for opportunities to bring them together for better collaboration between your math and science teachers and your humanities teachers. So the other thing is that when students are on the right side of the building, the right wing in the science and math classrooms, to get to the back wing, they have to go all the way around the building to get there. So what we're looking at is putting a small connecting corridor that improves instructional time and is a much clearer circulation path for your students to get from one end to the building to the other, and then organizing it by instruction. So you can see now all your blue spaces are in one location, creating your humanities hub. Your math and science classrooms are in another location, and what between them there are collaborative areas for your teachers and breakout rooms to support your departments. The other thing we are doing is at the art and music location, which is all the orange color, we are renovating the choral band and the bulk of the music spaces. Additionally, at the high school, we're looking at moving your main office further out. So the box that you see that says new construction is a small addition to accommodate a new main office, as well as new bathrooms to support your auditorium. So again, you can see the work is sort of distributed throughout the building. Looking at the choral and orchestra and band area, you can see that we are doing a bit of renovation to accommodate better music spaces. Right now, your orchestra space is in a location that I think was a community room in the past, and the proportions really don't suit that type of instruction. So we are able to work within the structure and not have to really address any major structural components, but to provide better proportioned and volume space for these types of instruction. So the image on the left is just giving you a sense of what the new band room would look like. We are looking at a new canopy so that we can better enclose some of the area to make the connection to the exit or the entrance to the auditorium, and to bring a new secure vestibule entrance adjacent to the main office. And what this does, it also provides in this case, it allows the school to use the auditorium without opening up the rest of the building. So there's a pretty confined lobby that that would be big enough to support events, but also helps to control where your visitors are through the building. So looking at what that might look like, it's bringing a new canopy out, in some ways close to where it is now, but extending it out to cover more of the auditorium. And then the red box at the back is actually the new main office adjacent to your secure entrance vestibule. One of the things we did find as we were designing this is that actually the canopy, as we've designed it, is actually quite similar to what the original intent was. And that was kind of shaped like an L, but I think it was value engineered out, or maybe at some point. And again, looking at the media center. So in this case, one of the nice things that the connecting corridor does, in addition to instructional time and ease of circulation, it creates a new interior courtyard, which is accessible from the library, and provides another degree of security from the outside. So this is the space we're in now, and this is an example of what that might look like from the outside. Any questions on scope of work?
For a middle school auditorium area, having to do the band concerts, there's really not enough room inside right now to even have the parents wait before they let us in. And now you're going to close off part of the school and have people wait outside, especially in winter. Is that the goal?
At the middle school?
At the middle school?
So actually, the middle school will now have
No,
a,
sorry, at the high school,
Oh, the high school actually will actually be improving the lobby space because the addition that we're putting on will actually create additional lobby space directly outside of the auditorium.
Is it outside the auditorium and it's outside?
No, it's enclosed. It's
It actually
inside space.
creates a lock-off area
Okay.
within the high school too, so where everyone can come in and gather outside of the auditorium before a performance.
Yeah.
So everyone's inside now and has space. Plus, there's additional toilet facilities for everyone.
I can
One of the major challenges we have at the high school from a safety and security perspective is that once someone comes in through the front entry, right, there's no
They're
way
in.
to stop them from going anywhere, right? So that, there really wasn't a way to do that in the existing space because that happens to be one of the major arteries that kids use in the high school. So that created the need to bring the space out on the front and then create a way for us to use the auditorium space without, the auditorium space will be able to be used while school is in session and no one will be able to get anywhere else.
In the same way the gym can function.
In the same way the gym can function. What's that?
No, I'm just saying, like, it's, you almost have to imagine every single person that will be in the auditorium waiting outside. So you almost have to create that waiting space to fit every single person outside.
Right, how big is the, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
The,
almost big
yeah, I
now.
misunderstood your question. How big is the, go back to the,
Yeah, I don't know if I have a blow up of it.
Yeah.
So what what you can see here is that
Right now, you have, that sort of
That little T shape right there is the waiting area for everybody.
right, and
And it's barely enough to fit.
but it's actually, right now, your doors are set far back. Your doors are actually at the corner of,
What it does.
oh, perfect. So here, right now, the wall is up here, so this is your lobby space now. What we're doing is actually expanding it.
Okay.
So all of this is new space, all in here, including this. This is actually outside space right now. So the canopy will come out, so basically it's very close to where it is now. And the secure entrance vestibule will be introduced adjacent to your main office. Again, when visitors are coming in on a regular basis, not for an event,
Right.
they would go directly into the main office, wait here before going anywhere in the school. When there's an event, we'll be looking at this set of doors, closing those off, closing this off, and really we have all of this space now.
Okay, that's what I.
Okay. So, where are we with project costs? You can see what the cost breakdown is. We've divided it up where you can see the percentage of these buckets of where we are. Infrastructure is 31% of the budget, safety and security is 10%, cooling is 8%, site work we have at 2%, and instructional needs are about 49% of the overall budget. Total project cost right now is 39.77, so 39.8, let's say. And you can see how that's being distributed across each school. Excuse me?
What is study number 1A?
Oh, study 1A means that we went through multiple concepts to narrow it down, honestly. So this was a second iteration of one of the earlier design concepts where we took out the infill of the existing entrance where it is now. We were looking at including an addition to fill that in as an additional classroom, and that was taken out along with a few other smaller measures. Because we did look at keeping the entrance up high too, and there just wasn't enough space to make up for the main office space as well as the instructional needs.
I have a business question. now been reported that they've lost 39,000 people out of the state of New York. Nassau and Suffolk in the past year have a net loss of 1,700 people. Nassau, I'm sorry?
That's all went up.
Nassau went up by 600 due to the build of places like the Atria, 55 and over, condos that older people are moving into. What is the formula that's input to know what the child population or use of the schools will be for the next 10 and 20 years versus the population that's leaving? If you talk to some of the, I spoke to the moving company that basically called it a mass exodus right now out of New York State. So I'm just wondering how that affects, will we have the same population numbers going forward? Are those population numbers coming down?
So
And
so the
how
state,
is that amount of
the
money
state
going to
education
work?
department requires that you do an enrollment study when you embark on a project of this nature. And so the district did use a consultant to do a demographic study, which includes an enrollment study. And so, in summary, the numbers aren't changing much, in fact, at all, for for your district. They did go through the change in counties. I mean, they have actually an entire study that was presented, I think, at a board meeting.
It is, it's on our website too.
Yeah. So this does take that into account.
So the first, when we can rely upon live birth data, it's more accurate, right? Once you start to get out 10 years, it becomes less reliable. And then the other factor for North Shore is that a lot of our families move here from Queens and Brooklyn, right? So we have to account for some historical trends as well. But Tina's exactly right. Over the course of the 10 years, we looked at what's the net enrollment. It's essentially unchanged. The middle school will pick up the highest capacity. And so in addition to looking at what's the overall number, we actually engaged in what's called a capacity study. So we looked at every square inch of our physical space to determine how are we using it based on the needs that we have. And so there is a percent capacity for each of the schools. They're all running in that 75 to 80% capacity range, which is good. The middle school gets a little high, which is why we wanted to add some more space at the middle school than the other schools. The other schools will have the physical space to manage the capacity of the classes that they need. The middle school needs a little bit more wiggle room, particularly with regard to the large instructional space. We looked at this from multiple different angles.
Which I guess answers my second question, which is the flip side of the enrollment's going to be X amount greater, are you doing construction and they have to go back and do construction again?
That's what we're thinking. So we looked at that capacity number and where the greatest capacity within the 5 schools over the course of time is at the middle school, and that's why you'll see the larger addition at the middle school.
That was actually, I was going to raise that point. It's a question of capacity utilization, right? So when you do the new build, do you increase the capacity or do you keep it the same? Assuming the student body is the same. In the new structure, is it increasing capacity or is it flat or?
Well, but at some point, the middle school does see a bump up in enrollment. And
No,
so,
irrelevant of the student body. So disregard the student body, 'cause that's
Okay.
a variable.
yeah,
Right, so just, you're building Yankee Stadium, you can sit 50,000 people in it today. You're building a new Yankee Stadium, it has a capacity of 65,000 people.
yeah.
So in the new school, does it give you an increased capacity, or is it pretty much the same?
It's pretty much the same. I mean, what we're doing is in some cases, we're taking a classroom an existing classroom that was divided into 2 classrooms because they needed the space and putting that back into a full-size classroom. And to make up the difference, building a STEAM room to really support a full STEAM room. And there's a couple instances like that at the middle school that are making up the difference of why there was a need for additional space, because they're really running at a very high, they're really over capacity. I mean, or just at the brink, let's say. It's very difficult to reach 100% utilization. I mean, it's impossible. for a school district, but the middle school is running in the high 80s, and that's
So if the
tight.
capacity is not increasing, then you would expect to see, let's say, more fungible space, so more.
More flexible space.
so that you
Absolutely.
You can bend and flex
Yep.
any bumps.
Yep. And in particular, the larger lobby assembly space, I mean, that space has the capacity, that has the ability to function as an assembly space, as a lecture space, as a study hall, an additional lunch space. So it's really providing flexible space that the school can utilize in different instructional needs.
So like at Glenwood Landing where we're really pressed for classroom space right now, we are reconfiguring some of the way that we use those spaces, particularly for our special area classes, and reconfiguring small into big into small, and then we're moving the ILC program from Glenwood Landing creative space over to the Seacook School, and then over the course of time, the program will float over to Seacook. So no one will have to change while they're currently there, but as new students get placed and enrolled in the program, we have a plan for. how
You
we
have a
address
certain amount of
those.
elasticity and
Absolutely.
flexibility built in.
Absolutely. Yep. Hi, George.
My concern is financial. You know, I'm getting a little bit of the area, and we're spending right now $170 million plus for some 2,650 children. We're spending roughly $41,000 a child. That's what we're spending. We have a number of doom and gloom points coming our way. You have the LIPA payment of new taxes expiring in a few years. Not long distance from here, we're gonna be, the community's gonna be saddled with that taxes. Okay, we're not going anywhere, we're gonna pay. You have LIPA challenging their taxes. And, if I have a crystal ball right now, that's a pretty good chance of winning that. We're gonna be saddled with those taxes as well. Other companies may follow that, by the way. Gas company, leaves that wide open for other companies to challenge. So we have all of that. I'm seeing that if you keep asking for $2.5 million a year, next 5 years, our budget is gonna be at about 120. We're gonna be spending over $42,000 per child. We're shooting now. Financially, my concern is that if we have an opportunity to shut down a couple of bonds, not resell, not remortgage ourselves again, especially with $40 million, to me is an opportunity to, I see that it's great, some of the stuff that you posted on safety, security and all that is cool. However, $40 million is a big number, okay? And I would say, I would, purpose of my being here tonight, and I hardly ever attend the meetings, is to please encourage both the administration and the board to consider this carefully, whatever you're gonna do. 40 million, I've seen the breakdown, that's quite a heavy number. It's probably one of the largest bonds that we're asking to issue out there in the last 10, 15 years. So, again, you're all community members and fine. I'd love to see a bond pass in the community, rather than voted down. And I'm here to tell you that there's a lot of talk out there in the community that, is there a need for a $40 million bond? It's quite big, and we're very concerned about that. So it's not a doom and gloom kind of, I'm just telling you, that tsunami is coming our way. We have it 4 or 5 different ways. The water company, if we succeed on the big fight that we have locally to get them out of here, we're losing those taxes, and guess who's getting them? We are. So it just goes around in a boomerang, and so you have about 5 different topics that are gonna hit it one way. So great improvements, 40 million is quite a bit. Thank you.
I would tend to agree with Mr. Pumbar. From what I understand, you're calling this a tax neutral bond, meaning bonds are being paid off this year. So you want to go out and get another one to keep the taxes high. Makes no sense to me. I paid off my first mortgage. I didn't go out and get a second mortgage. I appreciated the money I could save and spend elsewhere. I'll bet none of you folks
number of these renovations. And I agree, we could definitely take a look and see, okay, some of the instructional costs on there. But, well, I mean, talking about safety vestibules and like the air conditioning. I mean, some of these, the bathrooms that haven't been renovated in however many years. There's a need for this mortgage, so to speak, now for the next group.
But there's money in reserves, there's $27 million in reserves, what did they do with that money? Why do they need another $40 million bond?
We can talk about that too.
Okay,
You
but
know,
nobody's
some of
talking
these
about
people,
it.
but we can have-
Nobody's
in terms of a need, yeah, there's a need.
So wait, let me say something here.
I know that there's a need. It has to
So-
be over 70 degrees.
Hold on, hold on.
This year, yeah.
May 2nd, 2018 was 92 degrees. Well, how long should we have the kids in that? Only 3 weeks in that temperature?
Everybody, so when we set out to do, to put this, the scope of this project together, initially, when I arrived in the district in 2017, this was largely an infrastructure project. A lot of bathrooms, a lot of boilers and pipes and all those things. What we needed to do was we needed to look at the entire program, the entire infrastructure, how we use our space, our buildings, our office, can't take $27 million and just offset this.
So Peter, the reason to do this, right, the case to do this is to keep like a normalized flow, right, as opposed to the spikes. Do you have a chart or something that would visualize, you know, the current debt expiring versus the new debt, the way the debt is layered so that you minimize the
Yes,
impact?
we have
of it?
Anthony Nash is here with us. He's going to take us through he's our bond advisor,
Okay.
and he is going to show us the financial sheet.
Oh, perfect. And it's going to show the, also in terms of servicing the debt and cash flow. It'll show the delta that way as well? Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Peter, with all due respect, what I read, we spent 41 million for students, which is way above comparable schools. 41,000.
41 million.
Which is way above comparable schools. There's no explanation has ever been given why.
It's way
We
above
are
every
spending
school
more.
in Nassau County. Every school.
And certainly every school is
That's
this
not true.
size. No explanation has ever been given as to why. I mean, this is nice, these are nice projects, I understand what you're saying.
And they do all of this.
Where are the cuts? I mean, some cuts have to come from somewhere, so we don't keep spiraling out of control compared to everyone else in the same county.
So the people costs are largely tied to program costs. So we have a pretty rich, actually, we offer school enrichment, regional elementary schools, we have items in alcohol,
Not true in Glenhead, we don't have any enrichment after school, you have to pay for it. Some other schools do, but not Glenhead.
They're not just school.
Not before and after school.
You're not
During
listening to
school.
You're not listening to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have 3 school-wide enrichment teachers. One at Glenhead, one at St. Joseph's, one at Glenwood. Right? We also have 2 STEAM teachers. We also have language teachers at all the schools. You and I have talked about this a million times. You don't like the way it is deployed in particular schools.
Oh, well, there is no STEAM at Glenhead, but just to this point, I
But
have
the
to.
staffing exists there.
But I just have to say, we do spend more than every other district. I have a list from New York State. We spend more, and Jericho just employed an enormous, amount of money to do new air conditioning, to do new updates, new upgrades to their buildings, all within their budget. They budget, their budget is almost what ours is, and every year they take some money and they do a new project. They don't have capital projects like this. They don't have bonds like
They
this.
do it through a capital reserve.
But why is it that other districts can manage their money better? I just don't understand why we need a bond. I don't know if you want to do it now or if you want to make sure we hear from all the presenters, but I think it's hard to follow the conversation with the back and forth for everyone in the room. So when we're ready to really hear comments from the public, if we could use the microphone and just have people queue up and so we can all hear what everybody has to say and respond and
So the simple answer is a lot of it is in our program and our staff. We've done some of this analysis, so we can work that and see what Okay? That's our staff. Okay, so why don't we turn over to just the finances.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Anthony Nash. I'm with Capital Markets Advisors. Good evening. I'll be brief. So, I'm the district's financial advisor. I've been working with them for many years. And what I prepared here is I looked at the district's outstanding debt, and as Peter mentioned, some other people have mentioned, what obviously the district's goal is to keep this project tax neutral. So, the project is approximately 39 million and change. We looked at a layering of 5 bond issues starting in the 2021 fiscal year. layered on top of their existing debt, with the goal of keeping the debt approximately equal to where it currently is. Some of the things I'll just say, these rates are very conservative. Some of the things we haven't included in here is, in the construction period, there'll be levels of interest income included, which is not in this model. And there'll also be some building aid that the district will receive from the state that's also not included. And that'll help reduce the impact as well. There's a lot of numbers in here that you probably can't see. So there's a little bit of a visual. The blue represents kind of the district's current debt profile, and the green is what we expect. Again, conservatively, just the debt on the 39.9 million. And again, this is a pretty conservative model, what we expect. I mean, this is including 5 bond issues. They're not starting for a few years from now and going out 8 years. So, I don't have a crystal ball on where interest rates might be from then. We've all been thinking they've been, going up higher and higher, and the last 6 months they've actually continued to fall. So, if they continue on that trend, this debt will be even lower than we expect. The combined debt service, currently right now with the district and its capital appropriations is around $4 million. Over the course of the bond issues of the $40 million, it'll just gradually creep up towards $5 million. This next slide, my last slide, shows projected tax rates for Class 1 properties, which is all of you. And you can see, again, this isn't including, building aid and interest income, which is expected to bring this down to tax neutral. But even without those factored in, the tax rate increases are fractions of a %. For someone with a $500,000 home, your taxes would go up $20 a year. For $1.5 million home, they would go up, $50 to $70 a year for this $40 million project. So, again, in my view, that's pretty minimal. I know the district's pushing a tax neutral deal, and again, I think it's quite achievable considering those other factors. But I don't want to model where we think investment rates might be 5 years from now, so it's tough to kind of factor that into the projections. Questions?
I'm not a financial guy, but doesn't tax neutral mean just replacing one debt service with another, one amount of debt with another amount of debt?
Well, tax neutral means your taxes don't go up. And yeah, in this model where, the way state law works, debt service is one of those things that can be exempted from the state tax cap law. The problem is if you let your debt fall off and then for a year, your taxes are going to drop. If you then issue debt a year later and all of a sudden, you're tacking on $1.5 million of debt service, your taxes are going to go way up. That's not tax neutral. So there's a certain timing issue that has to be factored in with the project as well. And so that's what, this model attempts to achieve. So it is tax neutral in the sense that the district has a certain level of debt right now, and we're filling it back in with this new project.
Trying to lessen the debt, I would think that might be the goal.
Just want to make sure I heard you correctly. I think you might have misspoke. Did you say that the debt service over the course of layering out the new debt, did you say that the cost is going to go from $4 to $5 million annually?
Yeah, well, this model shows it creeping up. Again, these are conservative interest rates. They're not factoring in the state building aid or the interest income, which would offset the debt service, but it does go up. You can see that the estimated incremental debt service goes up, 100,000 or 200,000 a year. So it does creep up towards 5 million, from 4 to 5 million. That would be like the budgetary line item. But as I mentioned before, that only translates to very minimal increase, absolute dollar increases to a homeowner. Like I said, right, if your home's worth $500,000, it's $20 a year. If your home's worth $1.5 million, $60 a year. That's not including, that's what we think would be worst case scenario, not factoring it. It's not even really worst case scenario because there's absolutely going to be building aid factored into that, which will reduce it somewhat. And then there's going to be interest income, which again, it's just a little bit difficult to kind of define, what the district's going to be able to invest some of these bond proceeds at in 2025 to offset some of that interest expense, but it'll help reduce it a little bit.
I want to make sure we can all hear everyone's question, and it's with the air conditioning and everything else, it's quite difficult. Can we switch to a regular public comment format? And if anyone has a question or comment about the finances or about the previous presentation, we're going to have you come up and use the microphone. The experts will all stay in the room to answer your questions. But we will, look, we've got this one. If you would kindly come up if you have a question.
Testing.
And town of residence. The floor is yours. Thank you, Larry.
So Larry Ruisi, Glen Head. My question was going to be, I think you're prohibited, but like, for example, would you be able to raise the money sooner, capture the lower interest rate, the benefit of lower interest rate, and then fund a capital reserve that you can use over a period of time the same way you're layering out the debt? Is that possible?
I mean, the state is somewhat prohibitive in when you're allowed to borrow. You have to go through, getting plan and spec approval, and so you have to be somewhat along in the process of the construction period before you're allowed to borrow. So we couldn't just borrow all 40 million today and invest it to start kind of building up those reserves. You have to spend it in a certain amount of time. So there will be some interest earnings to help offset it, but we can't kind of build up a big reserve of that.
Rob Mazzello, Glen Head. If you, I'm sorry. It's just easier. If you didn't remortgage, for lack of a better word, how much interest would we be saving per year with the debt expiring?
You mean like how much interest on the bonds not issued, or just how much debt service is falling off?
We have debt expiring, coming off the books. How much interest is associated with that debt?
I don't actually have that number handy. I can tell you the district's debt is somewhat level until around 24. It starts to dip by around 700,000. That's principal and interest. And then in the 26 year, another maybe 700,000, again, principal and interest. I didn't break it out between the two.
So that's what they're paying per year now?
Well, they're paying, in total debt service, 3 million or so. Then around 700,000 falls off after the 22-23 year, and another 700,000 or so falls off after the 24-25 year. That's kind of how I was able to kind of model the debt in there.
Can I just ask, can I ask an unrelated question to the financing?
Can I just make a comment?
Yep.
So it might be helpful for us to let that, if you were to let that debt retire, right, what would be, I don't know if we have it tonight or not, but we can certainly calculate it. What would be the return to the taxpayer per household, right? Buy a $500,000 house, a $750,000,
Mhm.
$1 million, and $1.5 million.
I wasn't
'Cause
going,
think,
I
right,
wasn't going there. I was more going, like, are you gonna save $1 million a year? Could you use that $1 million a year on projects instead of letting it go away?
Yes, which is what we
without-
are, that's a
I mean,
good
we could somewhat kind of like spitball that number if you think about it. Like, so if, I mean, if 150,000 works out to be $1.47 on the tax rate, you know, 4.5 times that, you know, it's about $750 on your tax rate. You know, say maybe 5 times that, and then what did that work out to be on my other chart? Hold on. You know, if you have $1 million house, it's maybe $150 that you'd get back, ballpark, a year. And that's when the debt falls off. In 2024, you get $150 back.
That was in what house?
$1 million home.
My question wasn't really how much could we save if we
Yeah, that was
reduced it.
Peter's
Yeah,
question.
yes. The question was more, can we fund all of these improvements through the budget if we had expiring debt? That was really what the question was. Do we need to take the debt on?
Payments to actually do the projects.
Right. Yes.
Part of what we've been doing
Right.
because we weren't able with the change in the superintendent to put the bond out in as soon as we want it, right? And there's a lag time because the projects have to get submitted to SED. They have to be approved. You can't get funding, can't borrow until the projects are approved and you're actually paying out because otherwise it's deemed arbitrage.
Right.
So in the budget, you will see capital projects. Some of those capital projects are funded directly through the budget, utilizing monies that would otherwise have been spent in interest
Right.
payments since we didn't layer it in
Right.
with the change
Right.
as
Yep.
quickly as we would have wanted
Right.
to.
Yeah, I think the trouble with trying to finance it with just the reductions in interest payments is you need this slug of money, right? You need this big, chunk. You need millions and millions of dollars up front to finance the construction. So you need to leverage it. I mean, you need to finance it in some way.
Does the capital reserve fund allow for some of that to happen in conjunction with the tax savings?
But it means that some of those projects have to be done in piecemeal, which over a long haul is not cost effective. Because you can only budget for what you can fund, and it's not very cost effective. In this way, we think about it in a holistic way and lay it out over a long period of time. So you are doing multiple projects at the same time, and of course, there'll be cost savings with the bids also when you put it all together in a big package.
Just kind of one question related to timing. Like, I guess the project at the middle school seems rather extensive. I don't know how long that would take, and what would be the expected impact on the children going through the middle school at the time that the construction is happening?
So, all of that would need to be worked through, but in our timeline that we lay out, we have the project out for to the voters in the fall, late fall. We would then start building the SED submittals, right? They will expedite those, so we get them a little bit faster. But we're thinking that the first work on this would not occur in the summer of 2020, but the summer of 2021, right? And then so what we would then do is have to figure out how to stage this so the impact on the students is minimal, and that the bulk of that work is done over the summer. That's what complicates our these projects for us is that we have a 10 to 12 week window with which we have to have projects completed. So when we go out to bid, we need to really be out to bid by January, February to get the contractors that are the most decent contractors, and that helps us get the best pricing. When our bidding goes out very late, we end up either not getting bids or bids that are very high. So all of this, as Anthony was saying, all of this borrowing has to be very carefully constructed to coincide with when debt comes off, right? Because if we borrow before that debt comes off, then the principal and interest payments will hit the budget before we want them to, right? So the planning puts this as like a 3 to 5 year project from start to finish, and obviously we'll want to hit those safety and security things, first, but it'll all be phased in over the course of time. Did that answer your question? Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm Dave Lutmore. I think we really are faced with two questions here that we're talking about, and they're very different questions. One is the existence of this debt, and the other is what we spend the debt on. When I think about the existence of the debt, for me, the analogy is I'm the oldest of 4 kids, ranging in 14 years, and so when I was born, and then from that point on, my folks invested a certain portion of their income towards my education. And they spent that on me, and then when I was done, they kept that portion of their income to spend on education and down the line. So when I think about what we're doing as a district, and as a representative of the community, helping to determine what we're doing in conjunction with the community, I think about that chunk that we have spent allocated as part of our budget for decades towards debt service to ensure that we were addressing important current needs, important short-term needs, but also important long-term needs. And I think just like my folks didn't stop funding that portion of their income towards education, I think it's important for us to think about going down the line and thinking about the future, and continuing to invest that portion of our funds, not increasing them, which I think is what we're talking about for the use of the word tax neutral, but keeping them flat, but also making sure that we don't stop. Because, again, with using my family as an analogy, my brother and I are real close, and then the third got a little further apart, and the fourth was way down the line. They didn't stop investing that and take that money and spend it on vacations or a new car or pool or something like that. They kept that steady because they had to think about what was coming down the future, down the pike. I think that's the way we view it. That's the way I view it. And I think the question of how we're spending it and the necessity of that is a separate one, which I think is one of the reasons that we're assembled here as well. But I think as a lot of the conversation has turned to that method of funding, hopefully that's a useful analogy because that's the way I think about it.
My name's Lloyd Nadell. I live in Glen Head. One further question, I guess, for the board is that I see 39 million and change up there. Is the board really going to take a critical eye to this and cut out what's really not necessary? A luxury item. I mean, glass walls are nice, but I don't have them at home. I'm sure most of you don't have them at home. Carpets, for the students to lie on there are nice, but I never studied with carpets on the floor. Is the board really going to look at each of these items critically, and perhaps the bond will be 20 million when we get to it, not 40 million? Is there anyone care to answer that? Okay. Okay.
I'll try to answer.
My name's Maria Mosca. I'm from Seacliff. And Mr. Nadell, the reason I decided to try to answer it, even though it makes me very nervous to do so, is that I've been a member of the bond advisory committee that the district put together to help advise the board on the work they're doing. I happen to be the manager of the Seacliff School Garden, which most people maybe think is a luxury. It is a luxury because it's supported entirely by parent funds. I've spoken passionately about that being something that I would like very much to see incorporated into the curriculum. It's a tiny example of what I think the board has gone through over the past 9 months, and what those of us who came to the first community forum like this a few months ago went through, and those of us who sit on the bond advisory committee go through. We are constantly looking at what we wish we could have, because we all want the best for our children, and we are all paying those taxes, and it's hurting all of us equally, and versus the things that we know are absolutely necessary. So maybe it's not a perfect analogy for you, but I think that I sit here and I think, yeah, I could niggle a little bit. I asked Tina to hold that slide on the Seacliff Library, Seacliff Media Center. Sorry, it'll always be a library to me. But because my child happens to be in that school, it didn't look like big changes in the 24 seconds I had to look at it. But I do trust that there are really thoughtful people working on this problem, and I think we are, in fact, everyone in this room is in that category. I think it's important to remember, as Dave just pointed out, that the needs don't actually go away, that we do want to constantly improve what we're doing for our children because we get better at it. We think about it. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned that much tonight that I think is a big piece of this, and glass walls are part of that, is the security piece. I live in a bubble in Seacliff, and I love it. It's very easy for me to think that it's a very safe school. But the fact is, every damn month there's another news report about a very safe school having a serious problem. So I'm very happy that there's money being spent on these secure entrances. I think that that's a really important piece of this. It looks like it's a big piece of it. As much as I would like the doors to be open all the time, I know they can't be. It's not the world we live in anymore. So I fully support this, and I thank the board for all of the immense time that I know is going into this. And thank you all for coming tonight.
Lloyd, I don't want to leave your question unanswered. Right, so you're welcome. So the what will happen between now and the next time we come together as a team is we will go through every single line, every single project by category, by building, evaluate its evaluate the priority and the need of it before we go to final scope. So the answer is yes. Can I promise you or assure you or that it's going to go from 39.7 million to 20 million? I can't. But I know that the board will, and I will work very hard to make sure that whatever is in there is identified as the highest of priorities. Okay, you're welcome.
Hi, Natasha Gordon, Seacliff. I'm on the bond advisory committee too, and actually a lot of that stuff has already come off. I mean, sorry. A lot of that stuff has already come off. If you were here, when did we do the last community meeting? A couple months ago? There was a lot more envisioned for the instructional spaces than is now in the plan, right? So we already took out a lot of sort of wish list kind of stuff. But for me, it's really an investment in the community, and it's an investment in our homes. I mean, I think our property values go up. I mean, I was here for the presentation on the enrollment and the capacity study, which was fascinating because many of the children that wind up in the schools here aren't born in this district. So people are moving here for the schools. I moved here for the schools. A lot of people that I know moved here for the schools, and that's good for everybody because that improves all of our property values. A lot of the changes, I mean, my son is in 3rd grade at Seacliff right now. They won't even start on Seacliff before he's in middle school, and they won't finish the middle school before he's well out of middle school. So it's not about my child, but it's about our community, I think. I mean, you're saying that it's the first time we've had a bond this high in a long time, but that's a good thing, isn't it? I mean, we need to keep, but I mean, we need to keep maintaining and improving our schools so that the schools maintain the quality that they're at. And if we were having bonds every 3 or 4 years, that seems to me like it would be a lot worse. And Glen Cove just had an $80 million bond that didn't pass. And their buildings literally are crumbling. I don't think that's a position we want to ever get into. So we're ahead of it, and we're looking at the capacity studies, and we're looking at the enrollment, and we're saying, you know, if we do this work, we're good for, what, at least 10 years, Peter? I mean, that's sort of, so that's kind of where we stand. But we are being very careful with the spending. I mean, everybody who's looking at this study lives in this community and is equally affected.
Hello, Elizabeth Yakos from Glen Head. Sorry, I'm on my phone, but I just, I mentioned earlier surrounding school districts and their budgets and how we happen to be one of the highest school district budgets. The closest school district that has the closest budget to ours is Jericho. They have managed to do all of their capital projects within that $41,000 that they collect per child. I mentioned this before. I thought it would be fair to send you the schedule, which is based on public information that comes out of Albany. So I just emailed it to you. I'd be happy, you know, taking Glen Head aside, and I appreciate all the work that you've put into making Glen Head a better place, so thank you for that. But I just, on the numbers alone, we spend a lot of money every year, and I don't think we're getting the most out of it. So I sent the schedule to you. If you could share it with the board, if you want to post it to the website, maybe, you know, with some talking points, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Peter, can you just explain this? Our operating budget, this debt is contained within our operating budget. So the cost of education per student is included in the same number. So if Jericho's a 41 equivalent, you're saying, then we're also funding all of this through the same 41 equivalent. This isn't on top of the budget. But as the same portion of our budget that's dedicated to debt, it will continue to be dedicated to debt, but it doesn't grow the debt, it doesn't grow the budget. So right now, within our budget, which covers different ways to calculate that spending per pupil, but within that amount we spend, let's just call it 40, as a nice round number, that 40 contains debt service. As that debt service falls off, as we paid off principal, as Larry said, we'll be ramping up new debt and feathering them in, so that portion of our budget will remain dedicated to debt. In my analogy, the same way that my folks put aside part of their income to that. It's not on top of the 41, so it's not that, or the 41, that if we spend 41 and take on this new debt, suddenly we're going to be at 44, 48. It's going to remain at that number. That's what the tax neutral part means. Those are separate issues.
So So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a look at what you sent me. I am not going to take a look at it right now, right? But I will definitely take a look at it. I may not even get to it before, like in a really substantial way before next week, because I've got about 8 speeches to give in 5 days. So, but I will definitely look at it. My suspicion, right? And I will call Hank myself and talk with him about it. My suspicion is that Jericho maintains large capital reserves, right? And so a capital reserve is approved by the community with a specific purpose, with specific projects. We have one as well, right? It's got a cap on the number of dollars that can go into it in its lifetime, and it's got a predetermined longevity. Okay, so I believe, because I think I've read it, but I don't know for sure, I think they have capital reserves that are fairly large, right? So the way that they do those big projects is they go to their cap reserves. And so when they vote on their annual budget every year, right, they'll have the they vote on their proposition to approve or not approve their budget. And then they ask their community, the same way we did last year for the large space air conditioning projects and the high school ceiling. They ask their communities, we have this money in our reserves. Is it permissible for us to take it out for this purpose? And so I believe, if I were a betting man, that's what I think is happening in Jericho, because they wouldn't be able to do the grandiosity of the projects out of the operating budget. But I will take a look at it, I promise you, and then we'll circle back and we'll let you know. And I will be happy to share what you sent me to the board. Okay? Very good. Please.
So I'm Lisa Cashman, and I also represent Seacliff. It seems like a bunch of the objections, and I just wanted to address something that Mr. Nadal said earlier this evening. It seems like there's a little bit of a hangover from the budget, and that some of the bad feelings that are being expressed tonight have to do with the overall school budget that passed. Because based on the math that I heard tonight, even if we don't do any of this and take on more debt, our savings as a community, as a family, is going to be like about $100 a year. So there's not a huge opportunity to save. I wish that Mr. Pumbar had stayed rather than kind of throw out that the number was so big and he thinks it's not going to pass. And, you know, I wish he would have stayed to have the longer discussion to talk about what does that really mean? And it feels like more of a power play. So what I wanted to address that you mentioned before is, you know, why are we spending all this money? Because, you know, we're counting the same as everybody else in my house. And when I saw the big number that went on in the budget, I did do the homework about what is different about our district. Like, why are we spending more? And what I found is we have a lot more. Now, I had it all in my head when I was sitting at my desk. I was going to rattle it all off. The amount that we spend on advanced degrees in our professional staff is very different from other communities that spend less on their children's education. This fact that we start our kids in kindergarten with 2 languages, in one language, the opportunity of third. A lot of these communities that are spending less, they start in middle school with language, and there is a golden time, and it is research-based why to do that. The fact that we have individual, unique elementary schools that are community-based all around. We have more buildings as a community than other schools. So these are things that were important to me and why I supported the budget. I get it, it's a big number. Like, it's important to do the homework, but this particular way of investing back into the infrastructure, putting that down, it's not going to save enough to offset some of these other big community issues that we have. So, you know, I hope that as a community we can come together. Should we be analytical about it? Do we, you know, yes, but would it be nice to have gorgeous buildings? It's important. It's important that the kids have pride in where they go to school. It's important that they feel great about going there. It's important that they have fun and love learning there. That's an investment. So, you know, that's all I really want to say.
Hi, I just wanted to add my voice here as another member of the Bond Advisory Committee. And what I really want to say is I want to commend the team that has been put together on this project. I'm speaking as a member of the committee, as a parent in the community, and also as a professional that deals with nonprofits and capital project planning for a living. And I think the way decisions have been made up to this point have been, from my perspective, really responsible and responsive to the leadership in the district, to the community, to everyone who's at the table. And I think it's really hard. I hear a lot of disputing, specific numbers, but without knowing the context of the project, what the problem was, what the specific conditions of the building were, what the goals are, and what the future needs are, it's really impossible to say that the number is large or small. And as someone who's looked at a little bit more of the detail, I think we're getting a lot for the money we're spending. And I think we need to understand that without investing, there's a flip side. And I think some people have talked about this before, but if you don't invest money into your buildings, you lose, obviously there's a loss in terms of the physical environment, but as an institution, that's a loss in the ability to perform your mission, and the ability to attract new people. I came to this district 3 years ago because of the schools. When you put on a capital project, you see what the priorities of the district are, and that becomes evident to people in the district and to newcomers to it. And I think that's really important. It's not about a mortgage, a residential mortgage. It's about an institution that has a mission and is, embarking on a capital campaign to meet that mission. And it's a very different thing. And I think that the team's been really responsible, and I just wanted to commend everyone involved.
I'm sorry, I'm going to come back with the middle school question again. I do have a child in 8th grade right now. This was, as I said before, the first year where they moved the entrance to that lower level. It was also the worst year for traffic flow. And I think there was a direct correlation with that entrance being down there for the children. Some parents, despite Mr. Papa's best efforts, would drive down to that lower level, clogging up the lower area and making it difficult with the buses and children walking across the street through Seacliff, just creating a traffic problem and a safety issue, I think, just from people driving by where the kids are trying to cross, usually in the crosswalk, which is great. Also, the parents who do go to the upper circle and drop them off where they're supposed to, nobody is going around the entire circle. They're stopping within 100 feet of the entrance to that circle because that's the shortest distance for the children to walk to the entrance on the lower level. So you have cars basically driving 100 feet in, stopping, letting their children in, and backing the traffic literally up to the traffic light. So I don't know if any of that was considered in deciding to move the entrance down to that lower level. Just one other thing, and I'll give you a chance to discuss. I don't know if glass walls were still on the table in this new plan or not. I mentioned my dislike for that idea at the first one of these meetings. Subsequent to that, I did take my son to an ISMA audition at a school that had glass walls. Beautiful building when you walked in. Every one of those glass walls was covered with posters. So to me, it's definitely not a practical thing to be spending money on because nobody wants to have people looking in their classroom. So the teachers are putting things up probably because they don't want them looking in, and it does cause distractions for the children.
That's a lot. All right. So, all right. So, thanks, Anthony. Yeah. So, with regard to the traffic, right? So, as Tina mentioned before, we have the civil engineers coming out to take a look at all of that.
Are you looking for the other presentation? I am. It's probably closed already. I don't think we have glass walls. No, actually, the only place that we have some transparent walls are actually in the media center, and that's really for the visibility for the librarian to oversee the entire media center in one view.
So, where are the site costs?
Let me see, it's,
Okay, so we actually planned for some of these things, Rob. So in the project, there's $850,000 of monies for site work. We don't know what we need right now, so we do budget for soft costs, and there the soft costs are calculated at about 16%. Okay, that's thing one. As far as the glass walls go, what you saw a few months ago was very high level were very high-level ideas, okay, and concepts. What we will do now, right, is when we move forward, we'll start to really develop those skills. Where it makes sense, like Tina said, where it makes sense to maybe have a glass wall, we'll have a glass wall. Perhaps in the media centers, but we're not looking to, the goal is not to have, glass as far as the eye can see. So that was the second thing, and then I think you had a third. Those were all of them? Okay, yeah, so we do plan for funding to deal with those site issues, and then the design, what you see here are just very big sort of concept stuff. What will happen over the summer is CS Arch will really work on will work with us, our team, the board, really refining and massaging the concepts. So when you come back in the fall, you'll be ready to start looking at real plans and designs in the 3Ds that will start popping up. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Come on up. Come on up.
Emily Dowd, Old Brookville. Somebody mentioned that the buildings were crumbling. Don't we have maintenance people that are supposed to be maintaining the buildings? I mean, in our budget, so why should they be, why should the bathrooms be so bad that, we're at that point where they're crumbling?
These are bathrooms that haven't been significantly upgraded since their existence. I mean,
But they should be maintained.
they're
I mean,
maintained.
Functioning.
It's just that, for example, the wall tile is cracking or the floor
But that could easily be repaired if it's something, there's a crack or is a tile loose.
Compliant fixtures. I mean, there's a multitude of different issues per bathroom. A lot of it is ADA access. The fixtures aren't compliant, the stall isn't compliant, and in some cases, the floor needs to be replaced. So when you wrap it into a larger project, in the end, you save more than you would doing it individually.
All right, but, in our homes, we have something that's loose or broken, we fix it. We don't
Those things are
necessarily
taken care of.
repair the whole entire ceiling or repair the entire roof if there's a leak or, that's what I'm saying. We need to be more conscious of how we're spending that money and is it necessary? And we do have maintenance people that's, within our budget, we budgeted for that they'll be maintaining certain things. Thank you.
So the simple answer is yes, right? So we do budget for general maintenance. We do that all across the district. We have John Hall and his staff have a very specific plan of how and what they will do every year. To Tina's point, there are some bathrooms that are beyond just. They just need updating. It's like, and then sometimes if you've done a bathroom in your home, you want to maybe regrout the tile, and then you go to dig out all that tile and you say, now I need new tile, and then you pull that up and you say, oh my goodness, now I need a new floor, and then you look at that and you say, it just, sort of grows in scope. So while we are addressing these things, there are some bathrooms, like some of our buildings are almost 100 years old. So we just have to deal with the whole thing at one time. For example, at Glenwood Landing, the bathroom, there are bathrooms by the cafeteria that are in terrible disrepair that kids use all the time. So we just have to make accommodations for some of those things. John, did you feel like you needed to add something?
So, for example, here, since some of the bathrooms are original because they opted not to change them because they didn't need to be changed in the last round of renovations. The porcelain is literally gone off the sink. So we have cleaned and maintained that sink to a point where it's exceeded its life expectancy. And just an anecdotal thing, my daughter attended the ACT here. She goes to Glen Cove School, I live in Glen Cove School. She commented, not just because her father runs the facilities, but how wonderful and clean the rooms were. North Shore kids took the exam in Glen Cove and went, ew, when they walked in the rooms. So, that's
So,
still fixing everything that breaks, and you have things that are so old that they can't
Yes. Yes, of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah. Oh, for sure it is. Yeah. Right. The other important. Absolutely. And the other thing that's important to know is that when we do a big project, capital project like this, and we go through state ed, we get state aid back on that money. So the projects that we do all throughout the year, where we fix a bathroom here, change a faucet, renovate a room, we don't get state aid on that, right? When we do this, our state aid numbers are not enormous, right? They're about 9 or 10%, but that's 10% of $40 million is $4 million, right? That we wouldn't get back if we were just doing that through the regular operating budget. So there are some benefits to doing it this way, but we absolutely have a plan. We know where those problems are, what this project does. Just for those of you who are hanging in there with me, when we started this, we went through the entire buildings condition survey report that was put together. We prioritized those projects from priority 1 through priority 5. And so we thought, because we had in our mind's eye, my goodness, we have possibly $35 million. We can do anything with $35 million. And all that this project represents are probably a majority, not all, of the priority 1 items, right? So there were things that definitely fell off the radar that we'll handle through our capital project. So as we scope this, we took things out. We said, all right, we're not going to do this in the bond. We're going to take this. We're going to put this in the capital reserve. Nope, we're going to take this. We're going to add this into our operating budget. Nope, we're going to do this. We have some fund balance. We'll be able to use the money this way. So so the good news is, as we've gone through this project, as we've identified everything, we know exactly what the highest priority needs are, and where we have taken them out, we have parked them in a different place, and we know how we're going to fund them, whether it's in the very near term or maybe not. Okay, Pooja? Yes, absolutely, and then we can wrap it up. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pooja Veer in Seacliff. I want to thank the board for taking the time to have a public meeting on this topic and making sure that we're all aware of what we're looking into the future. I have 2 kids here in the district, one in the middle school, one in the elementary school at Seacliff, and my kids are not likely to see any of this happen in their academic career. They're not going to they'll see some small benefits of this bond, but a lot of the changes that will happen in the school, they may not see most of it. So why would I support something like this? Because I know it's an investment in our community, an investment in our schools, why people still live here, want to continue to live here. To say that, does a bathroom sink or a tile, can it be fixed with the current budget? I'm sure there's small things that are constantly being fixed in our schools over and over by our budget. This is not what they are all presenting here is not something that's a nail or a tile. They're talking about big projects that are really to make, number one, our schools safer. It is so clear that safety is such a big problem of schools all around the country, and it's not just our school district that has to address that, it's school districts around the country that have to address that. I think our board has done a really good job of being thoughtful, and maybe there are other ways we can approach this as we continue to refine this project and this bond, but I think this is the first step and, actually the 5th step in the right direction. So I'm hoping that, if anything, that these conversations are to help us all understand why our community is looking to make a positive investment, not just for the kids today, but really for the future kids coming into the district and that are going to be educated here. I may not even be living here by then, who knows? But right now, it's worth it. And I think that's the important part, is that we can't have crumbling infrastructures here. We can't have buildings falling apart. And I think this would be a lot worse if they weren't continuing the debt as it's been and keeping it tax neutral and keeping our debt floating the way it's been. Otherwise, our buildings would be so much more decrepit. So to say that, oh, it's okay if kids sit on the floor and eat their lunches seems a little bit preposterous to me. It doesn't seem like, oh, wait, I didn't do that in my day or back in the day. Things have changed a lot. I'm not saying that things have to advance to a point where it's like luxurious for the kids, but absolutely needs to be maintained to a certain degree that schools are kept at a level where kids can be educated, can feel proud about their schools, and mostly feel safe. So thank you all so much for making the time for us and giving us these public forums to speak to each other about it.
So we want to thank you very much for being here tonight and giving us your good thoughts. I would like to, before we break, thank Savin and CS Arch and Anthony from Capital Markets, who were here to give us lots of information tonight. If you have any questions at all, I'm pretty easy to find, so please reach out and let me know your questions. The next step in this project will be, we will take what we learned here tonight, bring that back to our bond advisory committee. We will have another hard look at this, and then over the summer, we'll then start to do the final scoping work and be ready to hit the ground running in the fall. So I thank you very much. If I don't see you, and I likely will, have a really wonderfully relaxing summer.